I'm curious, why do you find grasshoppers particularly interesting? I don't know that you've ever told me what you love about them, but
Um, wow. So, I don't know. Well, I first got interested in grasshoppers when I was an undergraduate. Growing up, always liked nature, was outside playing, um, exploring, things like that. But I didn't really pay a lot of attention to insects. At some level, I did, but when I came to college, actually, it started with my interest in grasslands. I didn't know we had prairies and grasslands in Mississippi, and uh, I found out about them. And I was working for a postdoc, and he encouraged me to do my own undergraduate research project. And so I went out to the prairie and started trying to figure out what to do. And this particular postdoc was interested in tritrophic level interactions. And so I needed a group I could work on, needed herbivores and predators and plants. And so we picked out spiders, grasshoppers, and plants, obviously, to look at the interactions there. And grasshoppers just kind of stuck. I started coming over to the Entomology Museum here to verify my identifications, and actually checked out Dan's books from the MSU library, and it was no small feat because they were in the reference collection, and the librarians did not want to let them go. But the postdoc managed to talk them out of it, and I was able to take them back and use them and start to identify the grasshoppers I was collecting in the prairies here and coming over to the museum to identify them. And we didn't have a great grasshopper collection at the time, a lot of row crop things, so I was struggling a little bit with some of those. And we had a former museum associate, Tommy Allen, who was Richard Brown's master's advisor, and he would come visit sometimes. But he was located at the Academy in Philadelphia with Dan, and so I was sometimes able to sneak grasshoppers up there through Tommy for you to look at and verify the IDs on. So, but grasshoppers just always stuck. I like them, and they're great for doing field work on. They're out there. You just go and get them, and they're part of the prairie and the grassland ambiance with their sounds and all that. So I don't know. They just stuck.
Just grasshoppers.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you?
Well, I did my undergraduate work at University of Michigan, and I grew up in Africa, and I thought that after getting my degree, I'd go back to Africa, and I was going to work on big mammals, conservation kind of stuff. And then I took an entomology course, and I did pretty well in it, and so the entomologists at the University of Michigan asked me to become one of their assistants. So there I was pinning grasshoppers like crazy, and then they invited me on field trips. The first big field trip was to collect cicadas in the West, and that's how I got to know the South a little bit, but especially Texas. And I thought, boy, this is what I want to do. I want to work on the systematics of a group. I didn't know which group. My professor at the University of Michigan worked on crickets. He worked on sound communication in crickets, and along with some systematics. And so I thought I would like to do that too. And after I passed my graduate exam, I had to find an advisor. So I went to Dick Alexander, and I asked him if he'd be my advisor. And he said, yes. What do you want to work on? So I said, well, maybe camel crickets. And he said, how about grasshoppers? So I said, all right, grasshoppers. So he and I went out into the field, and we just watched grasshoppers doing things. And so that was my thesis, was communication in grasshoppers. I wasn't terribly interested in systematics as such, taxonomies, yet. I was interested in behavior. So I did this my thesis was on about 110 species of grasshoppers and how they talk to one another. And during that period, I had to identify an awful lot of things, and I found that there wasn't a whole lot of good literature to use. It was scattered. There was a big paper on the grasshoppers of Arizona and one in California and here and there. So that's when I decided I'm going to do this. I'm going to straighten this out. And so then I went to University of Texas, and mostly I worked on Australian crickets because we had been to Australia for 15 months, and there was a lot of taxonomy to do there. And then but I was also collecting grasshoppers already and doing some behavioral work again. And then I left Texas and went to the Academy of Natural Sciences, which has a huge grasshopper collection. It's the biggest in the world. And I told the people there that that's what I wanted to do, was to do a treatment of grasshoppers of North America. Not just the United States, all of North America, down to Panama. And they said, can't be done. And I said, yes, it can be done. And so that's what we're working on now. This is the last big chunk to be done.
Wow.
And I have a good partner now.
So suffice it to say, grasshoppers seem to have chosen you instead of vice versa.
Yeah.
That's